right. So welcome to NewsNale 13. It's the first time we have guests on the NewsNale. We actually have a panel of some great experts to talk gun safety today. Our three guests are Jessica Dehn, Nathan Ellis, and Zariah Tolman. And I'm not going to waste your time introducing them. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, what they're doing, and what their history is with guns and gun safety. So why don't we start with you, Jessica, because you're the next one to me on this podcast.
Okay. So I'm Jessica Dehn. I started a business called Dino Drop-In about 6 years ago. It's now in 3 states, and we've developed a franchise so we can go nationwide. I started a preschool, pre and primary school during COVID called Acton Academy. And that has also developed into a middle school called Opt Out. I'm a serial entrepreneur and I can't stop myself. So there'll be more to come. My history with firearms, it's funny because ours mimic each other so closely. I'm from Minnesota. I got my first 22 at 8 years old. I looked at my parents like they were crazy. I thought it was a golf club in this big box. But I took hunter safety right after that. I've never shot anything. I shoot cans and targets. I don't shoot. I'm vegetarian. I don't even eat meat. So I don't have any reason to hunt. But I do think taking the hunter safety classes and things like that they were just a rite of passage where I grew up. Whether or not you were going to hunt, you needed to learn safety precautions when you were around a firearm.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Nathan?
Hi, I'm Nathan Ellis. Currently, I own a company called Earthworks Development. It's a construction company. A little bit about me and my background. I grew up in Ohio, joined the military, served in the 75th Ranger Regiment. After I got done, I moved over, spent several years as a government contractor overseas. My history with firearms kind of started when I was a kid as well. I grew up in a pretty rural area. So I grew up hunting and fishing. I've been hunting since, I don't know, I was probably 5 or so. Gun safety was big in my family, even before I got to the military. And then when I got to the military, it was, extremely drilled into me about firearm safety. And so that kind of continued up through, my time contracting, and even still now. I mean, I own several guns. I'm not like a huge gun nut or anything like that, but I own, I don't know, enough to keep me happy. So yeah, it's definitely guns are something that I'm very comfortable around. I try to keep myself aware though, of everything that's going on. Like I think that's the biggest thing, with me and my weapons, having kids in my house and everything. It's a lot of awareness of where my stuff is and how I'm taking care of it. So but yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Gotcha. Zariah?
Hi, my name is Zariah Tolman. So I just graduated from Montana State University's Innovation and Management program, their Master's in Innovation Management program, which was really amazing. And I started a nonprofit organization called Positivity Outward. And so we built an app that connects rural, middle, and high school students with mentors for well-being. And so the students can log on, these middle and high school students can log on and choose the mentors that make the most sense for their own needs. And we have mentors that can guide in topics like mental health, self-discovery, or college and career preparation, with all of the mentors kind of no matter which category, guiding, reflection, and action as those tools for well-being. And so my history with guns, I grew up in a town of only 50 people in Wyoming. And so everyone around me was hunting and fishing a lot. But my family, my dad had an experience when he was younger to where he never wanted to hunt. And so I grew up not hunting, but understanding the importance of gun safety and kind of that awareness that Nathan was talking about. I do love fishing. But my family always made sure that the guns that we did have in the house were always locked and kept safe, and that we weren't afraid of them, but understood how powerful that they could be. And so I don't own any guns currently, but definitely not against people doing so.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. And I mentioned this in our last NewsNale. Like Jessica, I grew up in Minnesota and had a .410 shotgun from when I could remember. hiking old logging roads, hunting partridge, and mostly just walking roads. I don't think I ever saw a bird when I was by myself, but apple in one pocket, box of raisins in the other. But we went through gun safety in school, and it was a rite of passage. It was just something you did. So we had great respect for firearms and never not had them. As I said in the last podcast, I couldn't do paintball with my kids because I was so drilled into me that you don't point anything at a person ever, that I would get out there and I would just get pasted, and that was it. So moving on, have your views changed, especially with the recent events in Uvalde, about, I mean, because I like the word gun control, gun safety over gun control, over how we should approach guns in this country. Anybody, anything changed in your perspective?
I can go first. I don't know if anything is, I don't know if my perspective on gun control has necessarily changed. I mean, stuff like this happens, and it's a tragedy, and there's no words that you could say that would make anything, feel better. But my perspective on the gun control stuff is, it just there needs to be more gun awareness and gun safety. And I mean, I'm just more of a person, like, I don't know about gun control. But I know that partly is because I'm not a person that's necessarily, got all the answers to what it would take to keep events like this from happening. But definitely something about, like, gun safety and just awareness of this stuff is something that should happen. And that's just really my opinion on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, like, I guess I feel like there's like a chasm between what we learned as children and like how we were taught gun safety, and like this idea of like unlimited magazines of semi-automatic rifles. Like I don't know enough about that, but I don't understand why that is. I don't think that's legal to hunt with. I mean, but I don't hunt, so I don't really know. But those two things seem like two separate conversations to me more than anything. I don't have much to say about it. Like, I would say the most disturbing one for me in not even recent history was when it happened in Red Lake, Minnesota, which is about 2.5 hours from my town, from where I grew up, which is very small. And so that was probably the time it was just like so disturbing, and it's a tragedy. I don't have any answers either. Obviously, probably none of us do, but I would say, like, I don't understand that difference, like why it's necessary to have these crazy assault rifles that I've never seen anyone hunt with. So I don't know.
I think that if anything, my desire to do the work that I'm doing has gotten greater, just because, and even seeing the change from when I have been growing up and the older that I've gotten, gun safety and mental health, I feel like weren't a conversation when I was growing up, that it was often two very, very separate things. And so I think reading about kind of in the aftermath of this, that there's plans for both gun safety and mental health, and making sure that there's support for the students who kind of experience that trauma and that traumatizing event, I think is motivating for me to continue doing the work that I'm doing, and make sure that those conversations do kind of go hand in hand, because they're very interrelated to me.
Yeah. Which leads to the next question. Why do you think these events happen? I mean, and I'm just assuming, that they didn't really happen 10, 15 years ago, at least as frequently. Why are they happening now and more frequently and on a larger scale? Anyone has any ideas on that?
I wish I had a better idea of that, because it's something that I struggle with all the time. And I mean, I hear people a lot around, they're, 30s, 40s who talk about when they grew up and how this just was never an issue. I mean, it's not like these guns weren't there. This just school shootings they just weren't a thing. I mean, I went to a high school where everybody had a gun in their car. Like you just brought, like, that was never a thing.
Yeah.
And nobody would ever think about that. And I don't know if it's, there's definitely, to me, in my opinion, there's a mental health aspect. But also, I mean, I think a lot of it just is going to fall on, if it's a kid and they're getting this gun from their house. I mean, to me, why is that firearm accessible to that kid? I mean, so I think a lot of it is kind of a lack of responsibility on parents. And I don't want to put it all on a parent because, I mean, geez, I'd locked my cabinets upstairs, but my kids somehow still seem to get in there and take out all the mixing bowls. I know it's not the same thing, but like we're talking about accessibility, there just needs to be, to me, there needs to be more control over these weapons, like in your own household. If you're the parent, if you're the adult, and also just, more talking to your kids. But I definitely think this is more a mental health thing, in my opinion, than anything else.
I think one thing that got brought up by a psychologist I listened to a podcast briefly after this, and they said that anger wasn't a diagnosable mental health concern and couldn't be helped. And I just could not even believe that was true, because I feel like I have heard of anger management classes that, like, you hear it in custody things, I feel like mostly. I just don't understand. Like, I feel like, to me, anger is something that I teach children about, and we teach them to work with that emotion and like how they can appropriately deal with that feeling as 4-year-olds. So I don't understand how that's a thing in psychology, that anger is. I mean, and maybe this was one psychologist, I don't know, but I can't imagine she'd be on a podcast saying something totally antithetical to what her education taught her. But maybe, I don't know if Zariah knows about that at all. It seems like I was interested to talk to you because of that.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if there's a specific diagnosis for anger, but that's also because like mental health diagnoses are extremely outdated. Like the way that we determine whether someone is mentally ill is a very old process that I feel like doesn't really represent the amount of technology that we have available. And that was kind of what I was going to say, is that there's a lot of complexity in the world that I feel like hasn't been there historically. And then I feel like there's not a lot of ways, or there's limited resources for students to be able to navigate that complexity. And then there's that question of access, that in the ways that they are able to kind of act out, or in the ways that students are able to respond when they are overwhelmed by that complexity. There's definitely a lot of access to firearms or other damaging tools that I feel like might not necessarily have been there. So both that kind of challenges in navigating complexity that contribute to wanting to act out in this way, and then being able to do so.
So, and I know it's a big question that everyone's kind of focusing on. Can these events be prevented? I mean, and is it prevention, or do we just wait till they happen, and a better, what they call interruption techniques, which I guess that was lacking in Uvalde too. But can they be prevented? You're nodding, Zariah, yes?
Yes, I definitely think so. And for each circumstance and each individual that decided that this was something that they were going to do, I think there are different paths to prevention and mitigation. But I definitely think that there's hope for that, and that it's not only possible but necessary. But that each circumstance and each individual, I feel like, needed a little bit of a different thing. And so I think it's important that we leverage fully the technology and tools to make sure that each kind of prevention plan is individualized for each person, so that they really do have the best access to what they need to be able to not want to act out in this way.
Gotcha. Nathan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, obviously it's not really my realm, but I mean, Zariah, what you're saying, I think is correct. You know, I think the prevention stuff with this, you know, in a perfect world starts, you know, at your home. You know, it starts with people caring more about your mental health, you know, being able to identify, you know, I say identify, and that I feel like that's even a slip, but you know, being able to see, you know, kids that have this problem and get them the help that they need. And I mean, just so people know that this is not an outcome that is acceptable, or, you know, something that you should even think about doing.
I think I just can't help but bring this up, but I went to a musical that's in Bozeman. It's a Sondheim musical from the 90s, and it's called Assassins, and it's about all of the presidential assassinations and the people involved in them. It's like the characters are the people who were the assassins. And I took my boys, and it said, you know, 18 and over. And then like the director warned me before going in, but one of their teachers was in it. So I had talked extensively about what was going to be said and what was going to be presented. And to me, like exposing children to that in an environment where then you can have a conversation about, like, there's a song in that musical that talks about like changing the world with your little finger. All it takes is a little finger. And I think, like, for me, having that conversation with my boys about like, did that really change the world? Like what they thought, you know, it was the insanity of those like terrible people that happened, you know, and, you know, terrible actions they took. But like their perception of what they were going to do with that action and what that action resulted in and what actually changed. Like I got to have those conversations with my sons. And I think that is a really important, I think like when there's a challenging conversation for me, my first reaction is to be like, they don't need to know that yet. That seems really awkward and uncomfortable, but actually they can either go and like look things up on the internet and I have no control about that dialogue, or we can present them to things to them and realize, like, even though they're still developing, they're 8 and 10, they have way more capacity to discuss these things and think through them and try to not understand, because I can't understand either, but like, would I rather have that conversation with them, or would I rather them like be talking about it with their friends or getting information off the internet about terrible things? And I think it's scary, but it's still the critical piece is like, I can see them and I can talk with them and I can like help them understand like their emotions, and when they get frustrated, how they, the more practice. You don't let them drive a car. They have to practice with their emotions just like every other skill, and like finding the right venues to just learn those skills, I guess, is kind of where I stand. Not like saying they don't exist or like everything's okay, just more like opening the dialogue about it.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. Is let's recognize it's something to talk about, and have the conversation in an environment that you can somewhat control, right? With their friends on the internet, there's no control there, which makes a lot of sense. And you bring up another point, like, yeah, we don't just let kids jump into a car and drive, right? You have to get permits, you have to get licensed. I have to get a license to light a fire in my front yard, you have to be a certain age to buy liquor, which is actually older than you need to buy a firearm, which is kind of weird. But and it's because there are milestones, there are gateways that you need to walk through to have the privilege. And each one of those prompts a conversation, or at least practice or an understanding, which I don't think we have right now with firearms, which is unfortunate. Close this. So I mean, what are, I mean, what are our barriers to getting something done? I mean, I guess the Senate just discussed something that looks like it's got some momentum, where it was a combination of some sort of mental health in the schools, some sort of enhanced background check for younger purchasers, and some sort of longer waiting period. I mean, that's a step, right? What do we think? Are there other things that need to be done? Are there barriers that need to be removed? Anyone has any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure what barrier. I mean, like I have like mixed opinions on, they're going to raise the age of buying a firearm. I mean, I think that's part of that bill, raise the age from 18 to 21, and which part of me, I don't have a problem with that. But the other part of me says, just like drinking, if you are 18 years old, you have to register for selective service. You're old enough to go and fight and die for your country, but you're not old enough to buy that firearm. You're not old enough to drink a beer in that country, but it's okay for you to be sent to a foreign country to die for that country. That's kind of my hang up on that. But I don't think it's a bad idea, because I also think it may give, well, you join the military, you get 2 years or 3 years of some really good training. However you go in, you get some good training on firearms. That doesn't mean that everybody in the military is good with firearms, because, man, I've seen some people that I'm just like, how about we just take this away? I know that may be scary, but it is there. But at least you have an introduction. But I think one of the barriers that comes with some of this is just kind of like, at what point are you saying, it's just kind of a slippery slope through all of it. Like, what point are you, taking away someone's, freedom and their rights, trying to appease everybody? And I don't have all the answers to that. I'm just, like, I want everybody to have some freedom. That's my thing. Like, if you want to do it, you should be able to do it. And nobody should be able to tell you that you shouldn't do it. But there's definitely that thing of, at what point do, like, your rights and freedoms impinge on mine? And I think that's kind of the area that we're trying to figure out here, is where do we get this to where everybody's happy? Because you're going to have a lot of people that are, like, well, the Second Amendment, well, and then you have other people that are like, no guns, you don't need this. And that's like the phrase, I think, that, well, you don't need this. Well, nobody should be able to tell me what I need and what I don't need, because this is, but, I think that, I mean, like, again, I think it's a conversation that, I'm glad that people are having. And I hope that there's a responsible and equal outcome that comes from it, to where everybody is kind of saying, okay, this looks good. Let's go forward with this without, getting everybody crazy.
Gotcha.
We need less crazy. We need less crazy these days, not more of it.
That's absolutely sure.
And probably all agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel like the fear and all of the stuff that, I mean, in the last 2 years, but it started way before that, like, it doesn't help anyone's mental health. And I can't imagine growing up today. I mean, it was hard enough a long time ago. And just the amount of stress that puts on anyone's psyche is incredible. I mean, it's hard for me, and I can't imagine being a teenager at this point with all of the things going on in the world all the time. And the way that it's hyped, like, every single thing is an absolute emergency, and that I don't think that's healthy.
And exacerbated on social media, so you can't even have certain conversations. In fact, there were 2 guests that I asked to come on here, and they said no because they were afraid of the blowback on their businesses and on themselves. I'm like, we can't, how can we even have the conversation if we have a social media or a culture that is so reactionary that we can't even state an opinion without being afraid of the blowback? That's rough. I have a really tough time with that.
Then the only people with a voice are the ones way far who don't care.
Right.
And it is terrifying to go on any venue like this for me about almost any subject.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, it's a form of censorship.
I've had social media stuff happened to me, and it's horrible.
Well, it's too bad because it limits all voices. So to your point, we only hear some voices. It's a form of censorship, and it doesn't lead to a really good place. It's too bad we can't be a tad more civil and understanding of other points of views. And I think that gets exacerbated by the silo-ness of where we get our information, because you can lock into wherever you get your news, your information, your social media, and just hear one point of view. So anyway, we're running up against the time. Anything else anyone wants to add? So you're all entrepreneurs, which we're getting back to the original thesis of the NewsNale. Most of our audience are either recent grads, young professionals, entrepreneurs, people trying to make their way. Any advice you want to offer them in the last few minutes that we have? Anything you want to tell them about building business? Because we have Jessica, the serial entrepreneur that's starting businesses, schools in pandemics when it's locked down. We had Nathan, who just started his construction business, and we have Zariah, who's really doing well with her nonprofit and about to run that and get a PhD, right? A master's, right? Yeah,
Yep.
Not busy enough. Any advice you want to throw out to our audience? Anyone?
No, my advice would just be, don't be bothered by the speed bumps, because there's going to be a lot of them.
Good. All right. Well,
Yeah,
great.
I would say just do what you dream of doing. Like, imagine what you want your life to look like, and don't like I actually would have never got, I wake up every morning, I do what's in front of me, I do the next right thing, and like I got something beyond my wildest dreams. And so do what works for you, and like keep moving forward, because yeah, there'll be speed bumps, but sometimes if you just look at the speed bump like, oh, this is just a learning opportunity, then it's not that much. I mean, it's still a little bit of a painful, but it's not, it's just something you won't do again.
Nice. Anything you want to add to that, Zariah?
Yeah, and it's along the same lines, so hopefully it's good advice. But the framework with Positivity Outward is to like guide students to use reflection and action to create experiences. And a lot of the time it can be easy to get stuck on acting and doing a lot of things and working really hard, but feeling like you're not putting energy into the right things. And I know, and the way to kind of manage that is to make sure that as you're working really hard and doing a lot of these things, that you're also taking that time to stop and reflect and make sure that you are really enjoying it, that it is what you're really passionate about, because those passions can change. And so just making sure that you're checking in with yourself often, but that you are moving forward and that you're using both to be able to create the experiences that are meaningful to you and really help you to have that life of passion and purpose, and is the one of your wildest dreams. And so keep moving forward, don't get stuck, but use both of those tools to be able to do what you want to do. Nice.
And not to bring it down a notch, but it's kind of like quoting Napoleon Dynamite and Pedro, all your wildest dreams will come true. But that's all great advice. Yeah, I love that the speed bumps are just speed bumps. What I like to say is there are no bad experiences. They're all learning experiences. So you learn what not to do, what you don't like, what kind of boss you don't want to be, what kind of area you don't want to work in. And you want to diminish that and dial up the stuff you do like. And that's kind of, I had a great guy give me the advice when it's never a straight line, right? You have a place you want to go there. It's not a straight line to that place. It takes some zigs and zags along the way. But
I think I really relate to what Zariah was saying. And I think in like the social media world, we see so sometimes inaction is the action. And as an entrepreneur, that's probably one of the hardest things to learn, is like when I decide not to make an action on something, but we can't see examples of that because it doesn't make the news. When Elon Musk doesn't do something, it only makes the news when he does something. So it's one of those things you can't see, but like, it's hugely important. Like, taking that step back and saying, okay, is this really what I want? Is inaction the right answer for right now?
Yeah. Well, and on decisions we talked about earlier, prioritization, what the pandemic forced was a cut through bureaucracy, and it forced prioritization and decision making. And that's what entrepreneurs do all the time. And sometimes not making the decision is a decision. It's a decision not to do anything, and that's okay. That is as good a decision as it is to do something. So that is great advice. Well, thank you all very much for your time and visiting us on the NewsNale, and hope to see all of you soon here in Bozeman, and good luck on all your ventures. And that kind of wraps it up for today. All right, thanks.
Thank you,
so-
Peter.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
So thank you for joining NewsNale 13. That was a great panel. We thank Jessica, Zariah, and Nathan for their time. If you have time, check out what they're doing. Jessica, you can see her stuff at Explore Academy, Zariah at Positivity Outward, and Nathan with his business. You can Yep, Nathan's business is Earthworks Development. And that wraps it up for this week. We will talk to you next week, and have a good rest of your week.